Uh-oh, there he is. There he is.
What's going on, man?
How you doing, buddy?
I can't complain. How about yourself?
Dude, I'm doing great, man. First off, it's good to see you. It's
Yeah,
been
man.
what feels like forever since the last time I got a chance to see you.
Yeah, man. It's been a little while.
Yeah, I can't remember. Was it Blue Holler or was it Adventure the last time we got a chance to hang out?
I know Blue Holler was that bounty race. I
Yep.
seen you there. I felt like we seen, at AOP. Maybe I was doing some shock tuning, and
Yeah.
maybe you were all over there just kind of hanging out, having a good time. But yeah, I mean, it's been a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And you've been a busy man, and it's one of those things I wanted to address really quick. So this is a kind of wild hair thing that I had where I was really. I actually texted you yesterday, and
Right.
I was like, "Hey, man, do you finally want to do that podcast episode? Because I've been playing a lot of games with shock tuning, things like that. I saw that you went to nationals. Nationals for Ultra 4 looked awesome.
Yep.
Obviously, the rock bouncing season just closed, and I thought there's probably no better time than right now
Right.
to get on the phone with you and just see how everything's been. So,
Yeah, man.
introduce yourself because you're kind of. Let me turn that off here, that alert box. You're kind of the man behind the magic, in my opinion. So, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me what you do, who you are, for people who don't know.
So I'm Chris Weygandt. Live in Glasgow, Kentucky. Um, got a shop here at the house and do everything from wire and plumb buggies, full turnkeys. Obviously the suspension stuff is really taken off for me. That's gotten to be a pretty big part of my workload, is just shocks and working on them, servicing them, fixing them, getting out there and shock tuning. Just, man, just kind of that side of things has really taken off. But
Yeah.
just a lot of buggy stuff. I don't really do Jeeps or anything like that, but
hmm
just basically tube chassis stuff and just some general fab work also. But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, well, so let me ask you this because, it's been kind of cool. I don't remember if we met each other first or if you reached out or I reached out, but, before this was your full-time gig, we were
Yeah,
talking a little bit. We were kind of, trying to figure out a way to best market what you were doing, and you had tuned a bunch of rigs and all this kind of fun stuff. But
yeah.
what were you doing for work before you got started in full-time off-road?
So I've been in the diesel industry for, I don't know, probably 15 years or more. Worked for a company called TS Performance out of Bowling Green, Kentucky for better part of 10 years. And then most recently worked for a company called XDP, still kind of do some stuff for them as a wholesale account manager. So some of the folks I know will know me from that as well.
Cool, cool. It's one of those things. It's so funny. I was supposed to meet you. I think it was either last weekend or the weekend
Yeah,
before. And when it comes to like my truck, none of my knowledge of like mechanical expertise transfers over whatsoever. So I had like a vent. I don't even know if it's a vent plug or just like it looked like wires to me at first, and it was just dangling off my truck. And by this point, I had been like trying to get my razor to start after not running it for like 8 months, and I was tired and done with it. And I just sent you a picture of this, and I was like, "Is this bad? Do I need to address it?" Because it was just
right.
hanging down. But it's got to be pretty useful to have that diesel knowledge as you come into the off-road sport, where like you said, you're doing a lot. I mean, you pretty much will do pretty much. I mean, anything when it comes to like you said, turnkey builds, right?
Yeah,
That's a huge undertaking, and honestly, there's a lot of people who like plumbing, wiring, that kind of thing. Those are the fine details that really like make a chassis, make a buggy work right, make it easy to
yeah,
operate, easy to work on. Uh, it's like an accomplishment rather to be able to say
yeah.
like, hey, bring me your mess and I'll fix it.
I mean, the past couple that I've done are, people that bought rollers from whoever
hmm
and they get it home and then they're like, yeah, I've got this and I really like it. And, they maybe decide that it's over their head, or maybe they just start working on it and they're like, man, this is, I've got this really nice start, and I feel like maybe I'm not going to do it justice. So I've been fortunate with stuff like that where people kind of turn their projects over to me and let me finish it out, and so far people have been happy with them.
Yeah, so that's the thing that when you reached out to me when we started first talking, um, I'll say it like this: at the peak of the podcast, I was having people reach out to me like, "Hey, man, do you want to collaborate or this or that?" And the main reason that I was so excited to talk to you was that I had seen the work you had done on the buggies with the shock tuning, things like that. First off, to me, shock tuning is like writing a book, right? Everybody could do it if they spent the time to learn how to do it properly. Everybody does it a little different, but
Right.
some people are really bad at writing books, like myself. If I tried to write a book, it'd be terrible. And then some people are really good. And it was the fact that you started, in my opinion, you've started this revolution where rock bouncing is going in a completely different direction in terms of performance, and we're seeing the performance and the chassis all kind of like reflect and whirlwind into like something new. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. I want to roll it back a little bit because we're going to get there because I'm excited to talk about it. But so tell me about you guys. Tell me you have two boys, is that correct?
Yeah, I got two boys. They're 8 and 10. Obviously, my wife, she's awesome.
Yeah.
She supports me 110%, so gotta thank her for sure. But we're deep into baseball right now. Baseball's kind of their jam, and like you messaged me and you're like, "What about next week?" And I was like, "Well, we got like baseball tournament all next week, so
Yeah.
that's why I was like, how about Wednesday?"
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it worked out. But yeah, man, they like baseball. They like honestly, I mean, they like off-roading different aspects. We got a little 170. My youngest had a dirt bike, outgrew it. He went to the Nitro Circus in Nashville last week, and apparently has decided like that's his new career goal. So we'll see what happens there.
So I can only imagine like there's a fine balance of like stress and excitement when it comes to something like that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I mean, we've got 170s, four-wheeler dirt, all this stuff, and like one thing will run at a time because
yeah.
like I had all their stuff working and then they like crash it. And it's a constant struggle, but it's
Yeah.
part of it, man. I
Yeah,
love it. So.
if it's any consolation, my 8-year-old's got a four-wheeler, and she all of a sudden the other day became really interested in it, and it's had gas sitting in it for like a year, and
Yeah,
it's just like she's like, I want to ride it right this second, and I was like, well,
right.
give me a few days, and I'll have enough time to like get it back
Yeah,
up and running. Of course I get it back up and running. She's like, oh, I don't want to do it today, and I'm
yeah.
not really interested in it.
Not care anymore. I've moved on.
Yeah, so it's been obviously good there, but all that being said, it's cool to know. I always like getting people's backstories because making the jump from uh, so having like I'll use in air quotes, like a real job, right,
Yeah,
to working for
yeah,
yourself. That's a big jump on its own, but making that leap as while you have a family and stuff like that too, I put a lot of respect behind that because I have a real job. I also work for myself, and I only can like I just have so much appreciation when people make the jump and they make the leap and they go for it, and it makes me happy that it's working out for you. That's
yeah.
the biggest thing, man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I'm, super happy that I made the move, and it's one of them things. I mean, I thought about it for a long time, and it's not easy,
Mhm.
when you got kids and whatnot, and but at some point, who better to bet on than yourself? So,
Dude,
that's kind of the mentality I took. Like, look,
yeah.
there's a lot of stuff, crazy stuff going on in the world, and if I'm going to depend on somebody, you know, probably should just be myself for the most part.
Yeah, I heard an interesting quote actually from Jim Carrey the other day. I was headed to the gym and I was just scrolling through YouTube, and his quote said, when he was a kid, his dad chose the safe route, and he was like an accountant, and it
Yeah,
was kind of like the safe, guaranteed way. And he said his dad ended up getting fired from that job, and he said it's funny when you do what you don't want to do, and failure is still an option. You might as well fail doing what you want to do. So,
exactly.
it's a nice little reminder of all the hard work that you put in, all those extra hours that if you're
Yep,
happy, if you're doing what you want to do, man, it's so fruitful.
that's
But
right.
all that being said, uh,
Right.
off-roading.
Yep.
Where did you start? How did you get into this? I mean, I feel like nobody just picks this up. It's like it's a lifelong thing you just had do forever.
Yeah, I mean, some people will jump in for a little bit and get out. You know, for other people, it's more of a lifestyle. I guess for me, it's a lifestyle more than anything else. But I got, I was about to go to college and I got a Jeep Grand Cherokee. And then I went to college and started hanging out with some, you know, a couple buddies. We started going to like Land Between the Lakes and four wheeling, and I'm taking that thing and I modified it like in the back lot of my fraternity house, like put a 3.5 inch like Rubicon Express and
Yeah.
like just random stuff, whatever, you know, on a college, like I'm trying to buy beer and off-road parts and, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. It was all right, but I was like, man, this thing's way too nice. So then I got like a 90 Toyota pickup truck, and that's probably where I like really started fabricating and doing different things, you know, because
Mhm.
it just, you know, snowballed because it had the, you know, crappy V6 or whatever it
Yeah.
is, and that thing blew up. I swapped a 4.3 and propane, and then like solid axle swap, then FJ80 axles, and then stickies, and it was just, you know, spiral downhill to, you know, 10 years ago, uh, roughly, I built my first buggy, and you know, the Toyota was like just, you know, your typical like whatever trail rig, trail truck that looks like a raisin.
Mhm.
You know, that was basically it, and it worked good, but you know, it was just one of them things. You know, as you evolve in the sport, and I wanted to do four link, and I, you know, wanted to do different things, and you know, ended up selling all this Toyota stuff and got a V8 and 1 tons, and that's when things really went south. And uh, you know, but also at the same time, you know, that's when I built this buggy. I was like, you know, the suspension technology was so. I mean, you're talking 2010 ish.
Mhm.
You know, suspension technology like that we had in the rock crawling, you know, world, you know, was pretty limited. You
Yeah.
know, like if you had coilovers, you were doing big things, right?
Mhm.
And so, you know, I wanted coilovers, but again, you know, out of college at this point, you know,
Yeah.
not very long, you know, just still making my way. And so I was like, you know what, these things like if it's one of them things I was like, if I'm gonna be able to afford these things, I need to know how to work on them. So I bought like a used set of coilovers. They had bent shafts and just I up front the guy was like, look man, they need rebuilt. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, this is my way to buy these things cheap
Yeah.
and then figure out how they work. And that's I guess kind of where my like got my start in working on shocks, so to speak.
Yeah, so it's very intimidating from not knowing what's in there, or even, I mean, even really how to get in there the right way, right?
Right,
Like,
right,
if you ask me, hey, you know, what are the things that you don't want to work on? It's going to be my transmission, the inside of my engine, and my shocks. Those are
right,
I'm I can maybe make my way through. I could do a transmission in like a razor, but like an engine, and then like shocks, I'm clueless. I wouldn't even know where to start. I'd break
right.
everything as I try to get it open. So I commend you for that because that's a lot of initiative. But I wanted to say too. So when I was in college, I had a Jeep JK, and I felt the exact same way. I was like, I don't even need tons. I don't even need the appropriate gearing.
Right,
I just need
right,
some king coilovers. That's all I need.
right,
So
right.
naturally, I saved every penny I had. That's what I put on there. I put like the Evo kit that you weld in and everything. It was
Yeah.
great, but rode like crap. It was one of the worst things, and I felt like I was like you know how the grass is always greener on the other side.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I could go like all the way up an RTI ramp, but I couldn't. I mean, it was just crap. It was just everything about that Jeep was terrible. So I learned my lesson there. But when you go from Toyota to buggy, when did like the buggy stuff start turning into, okay, these are a little bit more dedicated stuff. You're really hitting hard stuff, or was it hard stuff from day one?
Man, the Toyota that I had was pretty built, you know, as it was leaf sprung, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But when I built my buggy, like the intent was I kind of built it with the idea that I might go endurance racing with it because at that time,
That's cool.
um, you know, like XRRA was kind of
Yeah.
was going on, and like e-course around where I'm at,
Yeah.
the Southeast, like E-Course was kind of a feeder series to like Ultra 4.
Yeah, I forgot
So
about E-Course.
yeah, so I raced E-Course for a season, and but I built my buggy with those intentions of like, hey, this is something that I'd like to have the possibility or at least the ability to go do with it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, hitting the hard stuff was kind of the goal. Like me and my good buddy Josh Thomerson, we built our buggies basically at the same time. He built his way faster, but like I think he beat me, and he started after me, finished before me, whatever. But
Who's counting?
yeah, who's counting? Anyways, we both built them at the same time, but it was like we wanted. He had a Jeep. It was 4 length on like cool springs, and
Mm-hmm.
we were just ready for like the next step in riding or whatever. That's what we thought the next step was.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so we built them with the intentions of like going and hitting the hardest trails, whatever we thought the hardest trails were.
Yeah, absolutely. So you race a season of E-Course. When did you ever take the buggy and actually enter in like, I'm going to use 4400 as like the, really competitive high-end buggy, like, pro mod classes. Did you ever race that?
So like the top level of E-Course was C class.
Okay.
So that's what we ran, and E-Course was kind of, I think it had its heyday at that time, and we kind of caught it at the tail end.
Mm-hmm.
We raced at Dayton, Tennessee, and had like
Okay.
15 guys there, and that was the most C class guys at any races that season.
Yeah.
But
Now,
I never ventured out into the deep water, so to speak, at Ultra 4 with my own buggy.
yeah, it's so funny. I go back and I think I ended up watching the other day, just before Nationals, like the 2013 King of the Hammers, like on the Ultra 4 channel, they have like a highlight video from it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you go back and you watch it. First off, every machine is 4 linked. There's no trailing arms. There's
Right.
Shannon Campbell in the IFS car. There's one or two IFS cars out there, and you just go back and you're like, it's shocking how
Oh yeah.
how bad everything was back then.
Well, the technology is changing like right now so fast.
Yeah.
Even right now, I mean, the technology in the past 2 years has just jumped leaps and bounds.
I absolutely agree, and I want to talk to you about the live valve stuff, so don't let me forget that. So all that being said, because I have so much I want to ask you about like current events. Like I want to ask you about Ultra4 Nationals, rock balancing, all this kind of stuff. So tell me a little bit, now that you've got your business established, one question I had for you, do you have your own chassis that you design that's kind of your thing?
I don't, honestly. In my opinion, there's so many options out there for different chassis. I don't feel the need, and it's not really the direction that I'm going personally. Like
Sure.
my direction is the suspension, the shocks.
Sure.
That's my focus. Like for me, I don't see the need to have my own chassis. There's so many out there. There's certain like the partially committed racing stuff.
That's a great looking chassis.
I really like that chassis. My buddy Josh has one of theirs, and we've done a lot with it. And it's got trailing arms, bypasses, coil carriers, and like 2.5s in the front. It's like, to me, it's like the ultimate, trail rig, so to speak.
Yeah.
Josh Parrish raced it at Visions even, and you're competing at a whole different level, but the buggy still did decent.
So I think that to me that's the future of what the rock bouncing is going to look like. It's going to look like a little bit more put together cars, and maybe that's just with like for a lack of better lack of in-depth explanation, like wraparound panels, things like that, to kind of make it look like a more complete unit. But I think honestly, I think the reject fab guys really have something where it's as little as absolutely needed, and it's exactly in the right place. I think when at high performance, it's like looking at like drag cars, right? You can go race your Shelby GT 500, whatever, on the drag strip. and then you can go sit next to one of those things that's like 60 feet long and has a nose
Right.
that's like 2 inches wide. Like there's different levels to this, but I think
Right.
for the person like myself, if I wanted to get a big buggy, I would want something that's good on the trails and is capable of going racing, like we saw
Right.
Josh do this year. I mean, that machine was very, very. I mean, it looked competitive. It was fast. It looked like it can like drove well. I know,
Right.
through the podcast, I've learned that a lot of people, all these one-off chassis, they always have that one little thing that doesn't, maybe it turns more left than it does right, or
Right.
whatever it may be. There's always these weird things with it.
Yeah.
That thing looked pretty. I,
It's.
I,
I
I
mean,
like it.
yeah, like that program's pretty well dialed.
Hmm.
Lee's doing stuff all CNC bent, notched, all that fanciness, and
Hmm.
so I mean, and that's the other reason. Like, unless I'm gonna like invest in that machinery, like why would I? I
Yeah.
can get a chassis shipped to my door on a pallet and then
Yeah.
have it jig and assemble it. So
Yeah.
that's another reason. But like as far as the racing stuff, what Justin's doing at Reject, obviously those things are purpose built.
Hmm.
They're built to go out there and compete.
Yeah.
And are they probably the most ideal? Depends on how you set it up. I'm sure there's guys that trail ride them, but they're the engines they're putting in them and all that kind of stuff. They don't have the creature comforts, but they're going to put you on the potentially, if you whatever you can do with it, they'll put you on the box. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and as far as like the future of what those chassis are going to look like, I think you're going to see some changes with the next couple that come out. That with the way that SRS and some of point one or laying out courses with the high speed involved. It's not just like you're lining up at the bottom of the hill and just shooting up it.
Yeah.
You've got to be, you're running through whoops and jumps and whatever the hell they throw at you, and so the weight bias has to change.
Hmm.
Before it was like load them heavy in the front because we're going to shoot up a freaking vertical wall,
Hmm.
and now it's like, well, you're going to go up a wall, and also we need you to go through these whoops at 60 mile an hour, however fast you can run, and
So
without shifting some weight around, that's not going to work out very well.
So obviously, you look at the complete opposite of the spectrum to a rock bouncer. You look at like a trophy truck, right?
Right.
Where 90%, 95% is as far back as you can get it, and really in the middle, down low, all that kind of fun stuff. But like, how much? I mean, to me, we're seeing the courses, in my opinion, 90% of the time that you can really make up on a course is in the turns, and it's in those whoops. It's in those short burst areas.
Right.
How
Right.
much, how if you were gonna theoretically design a chassis today, weight wise, are you doing like 60-40 front rear ideally? What's like the ideal combination of distribution?
I mean, I don't know if there's a certain percentage per se, but it's about like where you put the weight. If you
Hmm.
can stick some weight out, whether it's a fuel cell or spare tire, which doesn't necessarily make sense in some aspects of rock bouncing, but
Hmm.
if you can hang a tire or get a 30-gallon fuel cell back behind the axle or close to the rear axle, it's going to help you going through those whoops. Right now you look at the vast majority of rock bouncers are set up with motor up front, fuel cell might be next to them,
Hmm.
or if they have one behind them, it's like a 5-gallon cell, maybe a
Yeah.
10, and a radiator, and then nothing.
Hmm.
And so while that for years has been worked great, just shooting up hills and stuff, going through jumps, it's obviously quite a different experience. It's going to pack the back, and obviously it doesn't work out. And that's the thing. You if you can be the fastest one to the hill, you don't necessarily have to be the fastest one up it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I think we look at like like nationals, for example. I mean, there was so much time that was not on the hill, and you have a lot of people who have the debate of like, should there be more, should it be more hill focused, centrally focused, all
Right.
this and that. But I actually really like the argument of like give the drivers more drive time on course.
Right.
I thought it was cool, the course this year. I really did.
And I get it. Like I see both sides. You've got the guys that love like hill killing and bounty hills, and they're like, I don't care about your short course.
Hmm.
And I get it, man. Like that's, I guess, the roots of rock bouncing is
Yeah.
just the hill killing. But for spectators and honestly for drivers, like I mean, not everybody likes it, and you're not going to ever please everybody, but
Hmm.
I think it's more exciting to see some of the short course stuff in there and make it more a different challenge and
Hmm.
mix it up rather than just shooting up a hill. I mean, I can respect everybody's opinion on that, but I
Hmm.
like the short course stuff and guys get more seat time. That's, I mean, like for me, I've always like endurance racing is if I was going to build a race car or whatever today, it would be to go endurance race.
Yeah.
It's just you're in a buggy or whatever for 4+ hours, like that's a ton of seat time.
Yeah.
And like that's why I got into trail riding. Like you get out and you ride all day,
Yeah.
and drag racing has never done anything for me. I mean, you're sitting in a car for 10, 10 seconds, or
Yeah.
however fast your vehicle is. Like, well, that was fun for 10 seconds, and now I'm gonna go to the pits and wrench on it, and like just it wasn't for me. And I
Yeah.
kind of carry that look into the off-road world too.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't never really equated it to, everyone always says it's like a drag race up a hill, but I had never really thought about the fact that the way that, the experience you have as a like traditional rock bounce race in like a traditional like drag race, they're very similar where you literally just go get 10 seconds of runtime, you go back, you fix it, you do it again, so on and so forth. I hadn't really thought about that before. But I will say one thing is last year at finals, they had some crazy jump over like an underpass on the short course. I
Hmm.
thought that was really cool. I
Yeah.
like the kind of the monster jam theme of it all, where they're really getting big air, where there's a really evident uh, like a launch and a very clear landing, so you know where you're supposed to hit. And like for
Right.
spectators, it was
Right.
cool because you saw you know uh,
Well.
like you saw DC, naturally DC Thompson just completely blow over the landing portion of it and
Right.
land completely flat. And it doesn't take someone with a race mindset to realize how far he overshot it.
Right.
As compared to this year, there was a lot of like whoops and holes that you couldn't necessarily see, and all you
Right.
really saw was like the car like bouncing around. And
Right.
when you look at that now, granted, I don't think all the machines are built for like that, right? The conversation we
Right.
just had, but
Right.
I think as just a general spectator, I think it's cooler when you can kind of see exactly what's supposed to happen and all that kind of fun
Well,
stuff.
and that's the other thing is like racers want you know they want to win money,
Yeah.
right? And they want a bigger, they want different things. Like they want to win money, they want to make it worth their time. But you got to understand, like if you want to like make some money, we've got to get spectators in the stands, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like SRS and Point One and stuff have, you got to incorporate some of that stuff, or else, spectators are like, well, I couldn't see anything, like,
Hmm.
and that's the problem with Ultra 4 is like, you go to AOP to race Ultra 4, and there's a few spectator areas, right? And they're, sometimes spectators don't have a side by side to get way out there in the
Yeah.
trail to see, and that's why you see like Ultra 4 going to like Crandon and different places like that
Hmm.
where they're set up for spectators, because I mean like this and just Crandon was just a reference, but like
Sure.
there's other courses that are better options for spectators to be able to see and actually want to come watch us. And
Yeah.
that's the thing is like, our sport's not going to go anywhere unless, or what I'm saying, it's not going to advance like we want if spectators aren't involved.
Yeah.
And
And being able to
that's
get it in
how
front of
those
people's
things
eyes,
grow. Do
like
what?
being able to get it in front of people's eyes. So
Right.
if even like at Crossbar, they just posted the highlight reel from Nationals this year. It's I mean I would say 80% of the race footage that day, and a lot of the race footage we saw was either the drivers coming into the pits or it was
Right.
helicopter footage, which
Right.
you kind of
Drones.
you lose a little bit um, of the impact when it's not, like Reno, right? Like RIP
Right.
to
Yeah.
Reno, man,
Yeah.
because there was nothing like
That's
being, watching these
I wanted to
videos.
get to Reno this year. Like I was, gonna
Hmm.
possibly fly out just to go watch. You know what I'm saying? Because that
Yeah,
was, to me, that track was awesome
yeah.
for spectators, and you know what I'm saying. That's the
Hmm.
point. Is like, you know, I really thought, and that's unfortunate about that facility, but
It is, and I don't know the reason why it closed, but I do. I mean, I think the overall consensus is this place is really going to be missed. But
right.
I think that a really cool place that would be great for an Ultra 4 race on the West Coast is Glen Helen. I don't remember if do you remember when they raced Ultra 4 up at Glen Helen?
Yeah, I mean, I remember them racing there. I don't
Hmm.
remember specifics, but
It was, it was a very, very low key race, and I think it was 2013. But Glen Helen is, you know iconic because it's like kind of like Crandon. Like it brings a whole lot of other motorsports with it, all in the same get. And I could be mistaken, but I think that the spectator area is super friendly because
yeah,
everything is kind of up on the hill in front of you. I would like to see them go back. Now I think that Ultra 4 is much bigger than it was in 2013, so it may be an issue, but it would be cool to see them go to places like that because I don't know about you. I am less excited when I see things on the Ultra 4 West Coast like San Felipe and the really far out desert races that
yeah,
are, it's cool to see them race for 14 hours through the desert, but
right.
it's again, it's
It
not
would be
spectator
cool. It'd
friendly.
be cool to go to,
Hmm.
like Baja 1000 or San Felipe or whatever. But
Hmm.
for a race team on the East Coast, like it's not feasible
No.
for most. I mean, there's
Yeah.
going to be a handful that have the support to do it. But
Yes,
you know,
exactly. Because it's not just you and your co-driver, right? It's four
no,
or five, pits of guys and trucks and four or five sets of equipment. It's so much, and I understand, right? Like I understand that.
just to go to KOH is a undertaking, for guys from the East Coast. You've
I've
got
been
to,
trying for 3 years just to go by myself. It's hard to
yeah,
get out there, man. It's hard to get the right plans, and even you know how it is. It's
yeah.
tough to get out there. But while we're on the topic of Ultra 4, I do have some really cool questions for you.
All
You
right.
got to co-drive at this past weekend Ultra 4 Nationals in Davis, Oklahoma, at the Crossbar Ranch. How did it go for you? Who'd you ride with? What class were you in? And how much fun did you have?
So, Cody Harsty races 4400 class. He's TMR sponsored buggy, and I actually went out to King of the Hammers with him and Chase Hunter this past KOH. I had done some work for Cody in preparation for KOH, and then we had just kind of been talking because I was trying to get out there to work with Phil
Hmm.
and do some shock tuning and all that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to figure out how to get like all my junk out there so I can be productive, working, instead of flying and
Yeah,
then just trying to like figure it out.
yeah.
So it worked out. I rode with them. Got to spend obviously a ton of time with them guys, and so Chase was in the middle of building his own race rig. So after King of the Hammers, Cody was kind of like, "Hey man, like you seem to know a lot more than just shocks. So would you be interested in co-driving for me
Hmm.
this season?" So we raced Rush, and then we raced obviously Nationals.
Hmm.
So
Tell
we
me,
had a
tell me about Rush first, because we'll go in
okay.
chronological order here.
All right. So Rush was our first race. Well, my first race with Cody, and it worked pretty. We worked well together. It worked. The race went well. We qualified pretty well. I don't remember where we qualified, and the race was going good. And we just had a couple problems, brakes,
Hmm.
and I think that was kind of like some residual from King of the Hammers. And then ultimately we lost the alternator
Hmm.
and just ran out of time at that race. But Rush was an awesome race. I mean, other than it being like ridiculously muddy, which welcome to the East Coast, but you know, it was actually Cody and I were talking about like Rush was like a highway compared to Davis, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And it was a really awesome course. You know, I would have liked to have been less muddy, but you know,
Hmm.
what do you do?
Yeah. So and I want to ask too. He's in the 4400 class, correct?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
4400.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yep.
and for those who don't know, the 4400 class in Ultra 4 is the, all, no holds barred,
Unlimited.
everything goes, bypasses, IFS, everything. Whereas, the 4800, excuse me, is front engine, which there's been a lot of talk about, front engine, single shock, all that kind of fun stuff. Um,
Right.
it restricts as it goes down, but so when you say you're racing at Rush, you're racing against big names like the Shares, like
Yeah.
the big dogs, the Campbells.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
4400
Jason
is
Scherer,
everybody.
Eric Miller,
Yes,
Josh Byler.
yes,
Uh, I mean, the best of the best.
yeah,
We're just a small team from Kentucky. So,
yeah.
but
No, I get it, man. So you have Rush. Now I actually watched that race pretty intently. It looked well mapped. It looked like the race course was really good. It looked like it had a very good diverse kind of arrangement of what the East Coast has to offer. So you guys ended up DNF in there, and then you
right.
go. What did you do between Rush and Oklahoma? Did he race any more?
So we missed AOP because he got married the same weekend as AOP. We had debated about if that was going to actually be a possibility, but I think we decided that he probably might not get married if we went through with our plans.
Yeah.
So anyhow, he got married. I went to AOP just to do some shock stuff anyhow. And so then Davis, Oklahoma was our only other race for this season, just the way it worked out.
Okay, so you get to Oklahoma, and I saw. It's so funny. It's like 10 days out. Someone put on, I think it was the Talent Tank Insiders, is like, oh look, a giant rain cell is starting to form. It must be a race. And then a couple days before you guys go, the absolute bottom falls out, and it is
Yeah.
absolutely so much rain. But when it came to race day, it looked like there was a lot of dust.
Yeah. So we got there Thursday first thing. We had left Wednesday evening. We got there Thursday. I guess when I say first thing, we drove overnight Wednesday, and like we got there about noon. And like when we were coming in, like the pits where most everybody was kind of set up was like just a mud hole. And the people that owned the facility were had dozers out there, just doing everything they could. And by the time everything was said and done, it was great down there. They done a ton of work to make it where it wasn't a mud hole, but we ended up just finding a dry spot and parking there. But we went and done some pre-running on Thursday, and we just took his side by side because it was so muddy. We were just trying to save the race car for Saturday. So went and pre-ran both loops Thursday. Got a feel for that. Like the A loop was high speed, there were some rocks on the course, but no big rock obstacles. And then there was a B loop, everything like intertwined to the short course.
Okay.
So then the B loop, you like peeled off the short course, run out, run A, and then come back into the short course, peel out, run B. And the B loop was where all the big rocks, like a big climb, and then there was like a creek bed that felt like it was fairly endless at times. It was brutal. And so then the B loop came back on short course, but short course is where qualifying was. His buggy, is set up for East Coast racing, and we're underpowered, for short course. Is basically the way it is, and at the moment we got some things in the works, but we kind of qualified where we figured we would. We were like 27th out of 39 or something like that. But race day.
Were you in the car with him on qualification?
Yeah, I was in there on qualifying. Not that I needed to be, but we just kind of
set the standard.
Just kind of run our deal.
Yeah.
And we had a good time. Or we pushed it, and it was what it was. Our it's just if we're not going to go to Crandon and like blow everybody's doors off or anything like that,
Yeah.
we've got an East Coast, Cody comes from a dirt bike, racing in the woods background, and that's where we make up our time is, in the woods. So anyhow, qualifying was qualifying. It was what it was. We started 27th, and got out in the A loop and started picking some folks off and passing some folks. We'd seen plenty of carnage. I mean, if you've seen any of the footage and stuff, man, like it was a tire killer out there for sure. He runs on nittos and we didn't have any flats, so something to be said about that, I think.
Yeah.
But we worked our way up, had a couple small issues. We probably cost ourselves 5 minutes or so on course, maybe over the course of the day, and we ended up 12th. So wasn't
That's impressive.
it was it was a good finish, considering the class of racers that we're in the mix with. I mean, we felt like we were happy with it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, considering, people like, I think Bailey Cole got 9th, right? So you guys are, very few spots behind the person who was in contention for the national championship as a whole. So
Right.
that's not anything to take lightly. That's a very big accomplishment. I wanted to ask you because I know Pam Hall, the commentator, she kept asking, is this like a mini King of the Hammers? How did you feel about that? I mean, I even saw someone say it was rougher in certain aspects. And what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I've never personally raced King of the Hammers, but Cody had, and he definitely compared it to it, maybe even rougher than KOH. I mean, just, even when you're on the fast loop, man, you're in this field and there's just rocks everywhere.
Yeah.
It was like there was never
Room to
any
let
breaks.
it go? Yeah.
Well, I mean, there was definitely some stretches we were pushing like 70 plus, but, that was few and far between, and you were always, having to watch for a rock somewhere or whatever. But
Yeah.
it was rough, man. Like, it was a good course. I mean, it fit our style, I guess, so.
Yeah, so that's how I felt when I did my endurance race at AOP. That's how I felt, except it's like you never get this mental break of like, my God, are the side of my tires about to get just completely destroyed? Because everywhere, there's like just these little rocks speckled everywhere. So that's pretty cool to hear, though. And I'm curious to see, how crossbar as like a race course changes over the coming years, because every year they kind of add something different. And now they kept in the I think I don't remember the name of it. It's like the wall or something like that, where it was the real tight rock squeeze. Did they keep that in the race course?
No, they last minute, I think somebody pre-running was on it or something, and they just decided that it was going to be a problem for race day.
Like a bottleneck?
So they actually, just I don't know what the issue was, but so they ended up taking it out of the race, which I mean, that whole section over there, take it out of the race or whatever, you're still running a creek bed for miles, it felt like.
The highlight video, I think a creek bed is the wrong way to explain it. It's a full-blown creek because all that rain you guys had. I mean, there was one picture of like a 4500 car going completely hood under, and dude, it's one thing to, again, I will always talk about the one race I did because it's the only perspective I have. It's one thing to race a race, but it's another thing to race a race when it's chilly, like starting early, starting during the day, and then you're wet, right? That first time you get wet, it sucks. You're wet the rest of the day. But not only did you get wet once, but you had to continually go through the same thing every single time. And, I said it was dusty earlier, but like, there was mud and all kinds of other stuff. I would see in the post interviews, people would flip up their visor and it's just mud through here. So I commend you. I think you guys got baptized by fire on that one.
It was a good race, man. It really did have a little bit of everything. I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I think Cody was tired, but I was good. we ran like 3.5 laps. I was like, dude, I think I could have done another 1.5, man. And he's like,
Oh.
dude, I'm done.
Yeah, it's amazing the stress that driving puts on you. Not only is it like mentally taxing because you're watching for everything, but like you don't realize how clenched you are, and
Oh yeah.
it's and
In that rock bed, he's like sitting over there fighting the steering wheel and stuff. I was trying to like, I was like, hey man, you want me to steer for a little bit? But
yeah, no, I get it, man. So Ultra 4, a great first year for you guys. Are you planning on co-driving with him next year?
that's the plan, man. We got some different things we want to improve on.
Mm-hmm.
The buggy for next year, some suspension stuff. He wants to do a little motor, uh, just add a little bit more horsepower.
Mm-hmm.
And the series next year, man, it's at Dirty Turtle, which is in his backyard.
Wow.
AOP again,
Yeah.
and then Visions is the last East Coast race. So, and then Davis, Oklahoma for finals again. So
Yeah.
it's
Those are great
we
races.
we kind of like where the East Coast series, what it looks like for us.
Mm-hmm.
Dirty Turtle being basically his backyard. AOP, I'm pretty familiar with. So,
Yeah.
We definitely have some goals for next season.
It definitely doesn't hurt the fact that AOP is like your primary like go have fun zone.
Right.
It's a good place to race at. It's rough. I mean, and I feel like a lot of the East Coast teams like the Millers and Blylers, they have a good time there because their cars aren't so wide. And I'm assuming, I don't know the width of your car, but, a lot of the guys that come over, like from the West Coast, Lauren, Vaughn, all those guys, their cars are huge, absolutely insane. And AOP is not a place for super wide girls.
No.
It's
No,
tight.
That's why I say like Cody's rig is, it's set up for East Coast racing. We're not wide, and we just like the short course stuff is just, we've got room to improve, but I don't think it's ever going to be like our, staple.
Sure,
So.
sure. Yeah, and a lot of these guys, they have lifetimes on short course. Like you said, he was dirt bike racing in the woods. You grew up in the woods. Those guys grew up on the short course the same way. And all that being said, so Ultra 4 this year has done a little bit of rearranging on the management side and even course design with JT leaving, timing. I think it's USAC has stepped up and they're doing their whole thing. How do you feel about Ultra 4 moving forward? I mean, obviously they have big sponsors like Progressive, Bronco, all that kind of fun stuff. So the money's coming in, but
Right.
I mean, it feels like something is coming change-wise. And what do you think about that?
I mean, the USAC stuff is good. They're going to handle, the tech, all that kind of stuff. And, from what it sounds like, Dave, the owner, is going to be able to kind of focus more on, like the race course and, maybe finding some different places to race and all that kind of stuff. So, hopefully the future is good. I mean, obviously they've got a lot of support and they've done well with marketing and all that kind of stuff. And, who's to say? I mean, somebody comes out with a different series and, competition's a good thing. If you've got one series that just dominates and they can, do whatever they want. I mean, competition's good. It helps everybody grow.
Yeah.
You don't just want one person just being, the head, main show. So if, somebody comes out with a different race series, I think people are going to check it out. And, if
it works, it works. Yeah.
Yeah, if it works, it works. If they make Ultra 4 kind of work a little bit harder to be better, then there's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah,
and I mean, same thing with, rock bouncing, like SRS and 0.1. Like,
yeah,
it's healthy to have multiple series and, work hard for your racers,
Yeah.
Give your racers a reason to come race for you.
Well, I always, I heard, I was talking to someone who used to work with Ultra 4 as well a couple weeks ago, and they were just saying, like, you kind of have to remind people, like, the racers, when you're Ultra 4, when you're National Rock Racing, when you're Point One, the racers are your consumers, right? Like they are
Right.
your customers, and to some degree, you owe them, some kind of service, right? But
Yeah.
it's an interesting relationship there. But all that said and done, I am interested to see. Obviously there's talk of new race organizations coming up. At Trail Hero, we saw the cool little short course desert stuff. I thought that was really
Yeah.
cool. But Ultra 4, I'm excited. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is I'm excited to see them go back to the motorsports park in Utah, I believe is where
Yeah.
that is. That's a cool race. That's a throwback from like when I was in high school. I remember watching it, and that was like, you know, I didn't see the XRA days, or I caught like the very tailwind of E-Course, and
Yeah.
that was when I first saw Ultra 4, was actually when they raced there, and I was blown away by what it was. And one of the backgrounds on my work computer I see every day is some machines running through that rock course there. And I think they've mentioned that the rock course doesn't exist anymore. So I'm curious what they're going to do in terms of building it out. I'm sure that they'll build another one.
Yeah.
But all that said and done, very, very cool. Cool to see them kind of go into new places. I'm excited to see them go back to Dirty Turtle. I'm ready to watch that. That's a good one. I actually may come back up to Dirty Turtle for that one.
Yeah, man.
But okay, Ultra 4, book closed. Rock
All
bouncing.
right.
Let's talk about rock bouncing, because it's growing at this really cool rate. The first time this year, we saw a guy almost knocked Tim Cameron from his dominant run of national championships, and
Yeah.
it's just really cool. You have instituted some change in this as well. Like I would assume, I would trying to think of the best way to say this. I would attribute a percentage of everyone's new success to bringing shock tuning to light, right? Because
Right.
trailing arms got introduced, but this missing piece of making the machines work really well was always kind of missing, in my opinion. There was a couple guys who knew how to do it, but maybe they didn't know how to do it, the best ways and things like that. Tell me about how you got hooked up with the guys you know now, and what it's looked like as you started to work with the rock bouncing guys.
So, I guess the first guy, the first racer that gave me a chance was, Justin Holt, which, he had Misfit. He had just built it. We had met at AOP, just trail riding, and we just kind of talked. He had me I think I went through all of his shocks on Misfit before it was done or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he was the first guy, man, that or first racer. I was tuning rock bouncers and trail rigs and stuff like that. But as far as racing is concerned and rock bouncing, let me reel that back.
Yeah.
Josh Parrish, years ago, when he had Low Cash, and then he had, the Outlaw 2 buggy.
Mm-hmm.
Josh was the first guy and of course he's local to me, so he was the first guy that gave me, had me tune his shocks or whatever, and raced rock bouncing. And then, most recently Justin with the Reject Fab stuff, and once I guess I proved myself to him, and he's like, man, this is great. And then it was like, if you had a reject buggy, like I was tuning them. So which was cool, man. And we've had some good luck with obviously Danny Smith, and Danny came out to AOP, and we really didn't get a tune session in on it. Like I pretty much just like set it up how I wanted, and then the buggy was literally, I think he had took it out like once back at his place or wherever his local spot is, and then he came to AOP and like couldn't keep a belt on it, bent some sway bar arms. It was just, it wasn't working out. We really didn't even get to tune it. So we tried, we talked about it multiple times, like trying to get together, but between his life and my life, it just didn't work out.
Yeah.
So he raced all season on, and we talked about some adjustments and that kind of thing, but he really raced the whole season on just basically a starting point, and so we'll see what happens in the future there. I mean, we talk a fair amount, and so whatever he does going forward, hopefully be involved in some capacity. But you know, Dexter Browder, you know, with Misfit, you know, me and him talk quite a bit, and we make some changes. You know, Charlie Brown Jr. I mean, there's been a number of guys, you know, and especially with, you know, the season wrapping up, I've been talking to a few different folks about what they're going to do, and, you know, some changes or new buggies for next year. So I'm sure before next season starts, it's going to be busy.
Yeah.
But, you know, the progression and stuff, you know, the trailing arms, and, you know, you can have all the right pieces, but if you don't have the suspension tools, and, you know, you can have triple bypasses and the whole 9 yards, and if you don't know what to do with them, you know, like, you've got these great tools and you can't utilize them, you know. And so, you know, you can have all the horsepower in the world, but if you can't make your you know, if your suspension don't work, it doesn't mean anything, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of leads me to, you know, what was missing for these guys off the shelf. You order shocks, right? You get them off the shelf. They come a certain way. A lot of these guys, a lot of trail riding guys, they'll just throw them under their buggy and they just kind of accept what it is for what it is. What is it lacking when it comes off the shelf?
So if you get, like, for a trail rig, not a racer, but like if you got a trail rig and you got some 2.0 Fox, for example, you know, Fox mass produces those things. They don't, you buy the like 2.0 coilover with reservoir, it's all the same part number, front and rear. They have no clue what you're putting it on. So they're going to put something inside there that if somebody takes that shock and slaps it on a Jeep and is going to run 90 down the freeway, they feel like won't be out of control for them. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So when you translate that over to like a full-time dedicated trail rig, it turns in, it sucks. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a terrible ride. I mean, it bottoms out. It's jerky. I mean, nothing about an off-the-shelf shock is enjoyable for, you know, a dedicated trail rig.
I think that's the trap that I fell into, right? Because that was something I was really uneducated about, and I feel like a lot of times, you know, guys will see a race rig and they'll see coilovers, they'll see bypasses, they'll throw a whole bunch of money at their machine, they'll get everything on there, get the mounts on done, and they'll go ride. And, you know, even if it's, you know, I see a lot of trail cars with bypass and coilover setups, and I'm like, you know, that's not always necessary, but you'll see it, and you can kind of just like see it when people aren't happy with what they did. They'll sit there and just like, man, I threw, you know, 40 grand at this and it still sucks.
Well, you know, you just because you buy bypasses and slap it on there with a coilover doesn't mean you're going to have the best ride in the world. Right. Like, it's probably going to be worse than it was before. But, you know, and that's the thing is, you know, you've got all these nice parts, you've got a nice rig, like, you know, spend some money, have somebody shock tune it.
A fraction of what it cost.
Yeah, hopefully me, but, you know, whatever, you know, have somebody do something and help you, you know, make your own, you know, whatever, dive in yourself. But, you know, just because you bought the high dollar parts doesn't mean that they're going to work like you think. So there's definitely, you know, it's just like an engine. You don't slap all these parts in it and not have it tuned, you know.
Yeah.
It's somewhat the same.
So I wanted to ask, how do you go about, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback in my headphones all of a sudden. I'm trying to figure out where that's coming from. How do you go about, what is going on with my, how do you go about doing like a rock bouncer versus an Ultra4 at like the highest level of like shock tuning ideas? You know, do you let everybody just slap out all the way, or is there completely different mentalities? What do you think?
Man, it really depends on, a lot of it's the driver. You know what I'm saying? Different drivers like to feel different things. So, you know, when you're working with a guy that's racing Ultra4, or you're working with a, you know, guy that's going to race SRS, like, you know, I like to get their feedback, because I can see something from outside the rig, but if they don't like it, it might look good to me and it might look smooth, but they like, well, I really want it to do this, or I like this feel, or I like it to have this kind of reaction when I'm hitting this jump or ledge or whatever. Some people want it just to, like a Ultra 4 is going to be, soak up some more stuff, where, rock bouncers in certain situations, they want the front end to kind of pack and jump over the next ledge, where, a different setup might soak it up too much. Well, the ledge they wanted to jump, you soaked it up, and then now they're having to climb this spot that they were trying to jump. So, it just varies, and there's just a lot of variables with the, how the rig's set up and what the driver wants. I mean, and that's where, I try and talk to people, like, what are you feeling? What do you like? What do you not like? And some people are better at communicating that than others. So, I mean, it's just, some people can tell you exactly what they want, and some people are like, well, I don't know, you're the shock tuner, you tell me. I'm like, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean,
So one thing I was going to say was, you know, I have to commend you on your process of going through the shock tuning, because you've actually tuned my UTV shocks. And, when we first got started, it was kind of a trial and error system. And I got a kind of a general, hey, let's try this. Let's see how it goes. Let's go from here. And I run it with an all things UTV spring kit with like some, new tender springs and some uppers in the back, things like that, crossover rings. But all that being said is, the thing that I probably commend you most for is the conversation that you have, or whether or not somebody is either, able or willing to have that full conversation about how they actually want something to feel. Because you're right, the same guy that bought the coilovers and expected them off the shelf to make his ride 10 times better probably is not going to be able to articulate to you exactly what he wants, his shocks to feel like, right? He just thinks it should ride smoother, and that's subjective. But when you go through all of this stuff, I mean, what would you say is the single most important thing for a trail person? Is it having springs that are right? Is it valving? What seems to be the biggest difference in terms of like impact? If someone had X amount of money to do one thing, where would you throw your money at?
I mean, unfortunately, it all kind of works together, but most people with springs are close, and some people are, might be dead on if they did their homework and have, kind of went through the process, or, if they get with me ahead of time and we talk about springs and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, the biggest thing is going to be the valving that we change inside the shocks, or, triple bypasses, the adjustments and all that kind of stuff. That, I mean, all you want the springs to do is, basically hold up the weight of the vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
And there's some variation of that. But for a general trail rig, the springs are going to hold up the weight of the vehicle. If you're oversprung, no matter, if you're way oversprung, it's going to be a crappy ride.
Mm-hmm.
I can revalve it or whatever, and, but if push comes to shove and you've got some like 500-pound spring where you need like a 200,
Mm-hmm.
there's only so much we can do. But most people are pretty close, and that's why I like to have the conversations ahead of time, because the last thing I want when I travel X amount of hours and you meet me there and you've traveled however many hours to get there is to be like, oh, I didn't know you had these awful springs, like we should have addressed this ahead of time. And that's why I try and have like those detailed conversations ahead of time, because I don't want to waste anybody's time or money either.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I want to ask you, because really the last question I have for you is about bypasses, coilovers, and how they kind of work together. But before we get there, you started your UTV valving, spring, the whole 9 yards. You kind of started it here this year. Tell me a little bit about what you've learned, what you've worked on, and if there's anything that particularly stands out to you in regards to the UTV stuff.
I mean, big buggies are pretty much most of my workload. I mean, the UTV stuff is come and go. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there in that market, and that's fine. I've had, you've got those walkers,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you were pretty pleased with yours, like
Perfect.
one shot.
Yeah,
Like,
perfect, man.
so, and I've got a couple buddies, with walkers and stuff like that. I've tried some different things and tweaked and back and forth, but I mean, most people it seems like an inexpensive upgrade for most people on their side by sides is like a spring kit.
Mm-hmm.
So, most people do that, and then, I'll get people that, I've done this spring kit, but I think my shocks are wore out,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the time it's because there's no nitrogen left in them, and that's just part of, that's maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
But, so we dive in and, clean them up and revalve them, and then they've got a, whole new experience. But, obviously 4-seater versus 2-seater, are you going to pack like a 60 million quart Yeti, or you just have like a little soft side cooler?
Mm-hmm.
Like all that kind of stuff comes into play, especially with side by sides, being as light as they are. I mean, you throw a decent sized cooler on a trail rig, it's not going to be a huge difference, but, side by sides, seem to take that a little bit, just you have to be aware. Like, are you going to strap like, 2 30-packs in this 60 quart Yeti all the time, or
and have 100 pounds of tools in the back too? Yeah.
So,
I definitely see where that can make a difference. But what I wanted to ask you, actually, one more thing before we get to how the coils, like how coilovers and bypasses work together, is shock maintenance and what are bad things for your shocks? Like, if I have my shocks valved for, trail riding, things like that, if I go shoot them off a jump and they completely blow through, like if I'm really rough on it or doing this and that, like what damages the internals, and is there anything that I should be keeping an eye out for, with big buggy or UTV? Is there things that I should be looking out for?
I mean, the biggest thing that everybody needs to do is pay attention to nitrogen. Like, people, I feel like more times than not, people are like, I don't know, like, when was the last time you charged them? I don't know. They had nitrogen in it when I bought it. Like, okay, that was like 6 years ago. So, if nitrogen's not expensive,
Mm-hmm.
and, anymore, it's become pretty readily available with, I think people are using them to fill car tires and all that crap now. So,
Mm-hmm.
If you can get yourself a nitrogen tank, or, a shop or something, check your nitrogen. Just, depends on the shock, but 200's fairly common, like fully extend them and put some nitrogen in them. Even if you don't extend them, bump it up to like 250 and fill them on the ground if you have to, something. But people don't check that stuff. They just assume that, well, I charged it that one time and it should be good, right? Like, no, it's unfortunately not. That's not the way it works.
How often would you recommend?
Man, it just depends on how much you ride. If you go out and ride for 3 days straight and you're beating the hell out of that thing, it should be part of your like prep for your next trip.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're just out, if all you do is just trail ride, you're gonna get 6 months. It just kind of depends on how you ride and how much. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if people know, like, I took, you go ride and you're like, man, I beat the crap out of that thing this weekend. Well, maybe you should do some maintenance.
I've never heard of that.
Again, maybe tag a jam link on jam that on a link or something like it. When you've gone out and abused your equipment, like, do the proper preparation for the next trip.
Understood.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, because things start moving around, and now you got oil leaking out that you could have prevented happening. Like, a lot of this stuff is preventative maintenance. Just check some stuff every now and then. Don't just assume that since they were on there when you bought it that they're great.
Yeah. Okay, so my last question I have for you, and then we can, if you have anything, we can talk after that. But The way that, coilover bypass has always been explained to me was that the coilover, once you add the bypass, is essentially just a coil stack. It's just there to hold the coils. When it comes to the importance, going from a coilover single application to coilover bypass, properly tuned. We'll just kind of use that blanket statement, right? Properly tuned. How much of an impact does adding a bypass have, and what are the benefits when you say things like triple bypass? What are the benefits that somebody gains when they add something like that to their vehicle?
So that's a lot to kind of go through. But
Give me the high level.
So it depends on the application. Like on an Ultra 4 or a heavier rig, if on like a rock bouncer or a lighter application, we're probably you don't necessarily need a reservoir on it. We're gonna gut it, make it a coil carrier, no valving inside. You know what I'm saying? On an application like an Ultra 4 buggy or a trail rig with trailing arms, and maybe they got a big fuel cell and a spare in the back, like we're gonna keep a reservoir on that thing, hopefully, and a little bit of valving in there just to kind of help the bypass, carry some of that load. So, when you add the bypass on, obviously you're getting the benefits of, rather than just having like your single stage coilover, you've got the triple bypass. Now, when you say triple bypass, that's not all bypasses are created equal. You've got
that's a heart procedure, right?
Yeah. So like just because you've got 3 tubes doesn't they're all not created equally. Like there's overlapping layout, there's staggered. Overlapping is the better of the two. The tube size, the diameter of those bypass tubes plays effect. So you see people, they're like, oh, I don't, like what you got, I don't know, triple bypasses. Like, well, there's more there than just like, you've got to tell me some things. Like, yeah. So just because you're shopping for shocks and it's like, oh, this guy's got triple bypasses, like you need to look at them and figure out like what they actually are.
Are the staggered and overlapping, are those, do they each kind of go with a brand, or does each brand offer different versions?
It's everybody offers different options, and some of it's like newer technology versus shocks that are 4 or 5 years old kind of thing. So like if you've got a staggered layout, you've got like a long tube here and like a short tube here, right? And then overlapping, you've got a tube that starts up here, one here, and they both end at the same place down at the bottom. So when you've got like a staggered layout with one tube on top of the other, while you have 3 different bypasses, like essentially you've got like a single bypass and another single bypass, right? And you're only moving so much fluid around the piston, and that's kind of the name of the game. With a staggered layout, you've got the 2 tubes, they stop at the same place at the bottom, one stops a little bit higher at the top, right? So now you're moving in a certain range, you're moving twice as much fluid around the piston. So that's something that, when we're shock tuning, the name of the game is flow, right? And we're trying to control the flow and in the different zones, and then bump zone, all that kind of stuff. So there's certain times where, I'm modifying internals on a bypass to create flow because, yeah, you've got a triple bypass, but it's not the type of bypass that flows as well as others.
Sure.
So there's a lot there. I mean, and that's something that I see a lot is guys are like, I see this stuff for sale, and I'm like, I'll get somebody, hit me up like, what do you think? And I'm like, well, this is what here's what it is. You make your own decision. I'm not going to tell you what you can and can't have. We can make we can make certain things work. Are they going to perform as well as other options? Maybe not, but maybe they don't come at that higher price tag either. So there's just some different variables. And, even with, triple bypass, like I said, it really depends on the application as far as the coilover, like 2.0 or 2.5, resi or no resi. I mean, obviously single shock rig, I'm going to suggest reservoirs,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise you've got an emulsion, and you're mixing. There's no IFP in a emulsion shock. You know what I'm saying? You're
Yeah.
just introducing nitrogen and oil right off the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to get what you get. With the
Mm-hmm.
reservoir, we can do a lot more. You're going to have a more enjoyable ride for a guy that's just a trail rig.
Mm-hmm.
So I do that a lot, man. Guys build something and they're talked into a certain thing or trying to save a buck, so they go with the less expensive coilovers, but now they're ready for it to ride better, and so we add reservoirs and make them happy. So that's
So
an option.
I'm trying to think here. I was listening to I was listening to you talk and also trying to think of my next question here, but when you're adjusting these, you're adjusting valving inside. And one of the new things that we had talked about earlier about the innovation of shocks is the idea of these, live valve systems, these electronically changing systems. A lot of them that we're seeing we're seeing some in 4,400 cars nowadays, but primarily the application is UTVs. The UTV is not only a coilover, but a lot of the Fox like 3.0 stuff is internal bypass. So it's a coilover on the outside with an internal bypass, or a bypass rather, within the actual shock. Can you explain, or to the best of your knowledge, like how the live valving works and what it's doing? And I mean,
So the Fox IBP stuff, you've got like a tube inside of a tube, right?
mm-hmm.
Like if you open that shock up, even though it's like a 2.5 or a 3.0, if it's a 2.5, like the inner diameter, like your piston's going to be a 2.0. If it's a 3.0 for like the rear, your sleeves inside there, it's like a 2.5. You've got these tubes and they've got some holes and like some like flaps. I don't know the technical term.
Sure, it works.
That's your bypass internally. Is it ever going to do what like an external bypass can do? Like with some heavy modification, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
But I know there's guys out there that do some crazy stuff with them things, and yeah, I mean that's great, but I don't think you could ever replace like a external bypass. But obviously, if you're only a single shock and you can only have a coilover, like IBP is the way to go, because it does give you some of that bypass feature.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, like the live valving stuff, I mean, it's basically like electronic. You know how most side-by-side shocks have like the knobs on the reservoirs?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a clicker, so to speak.
Yeah.
Most of those are just electronically controlled clickers for, a better sense. I don't know a better way to say it. That's basically what it is you're getting some control.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure out there in the world there's some fancy trophy truck stuff where maybe they're doing stuff with the pistons, but like
mm-hmm.
as far as the side by sides, it's just like a electronic controlled clicker on the reservoir, which it's just a fluid restriction, which it does. I mean, you like on your walkers, you dial them things up and they're going to be a little bit firmer.
Mm-hmm.
They're restricting flow between the shock body and the reservoir. So it's going to give that, a little sense of slight adjustment,
Yeah, that's interesting. I was always curious how, because the way that they claim it, with live valving, they really make it seem like there's like, it's a good marketing thing, right? Where they make it seem like shims or, being adjusted, things like that. But I hadn't really thought about the fact that it's probably just an electronic clicker.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some here,
Mm-hmm.
that's just, I mean, that's all it is. I mean, I'm sure like in the trophy truck world, they're doing some fanciness that we don't have access to as just, general consumers out here in the world. But for the side by sides, everything, I mean, and I could be wrong. I'm not saying
I don't know.
I know everything by any means. I definitely don't.
You know more than me.
But from what I've seen with the Fox, live valve stuff or whatever, it's electronic clickers.
Okay. My last question for you is, if you were going to say, here's my 5-star approval on a coilover and bypass. Give me a brand, give me diameters, give me everything, and do it for. We'll say, give me one setup for like a rock bouncer / trail car, and then an Ultra 4 car.
So it's going to be weight dependent, but say
Okay.
like a rock bouncer, in the front, you know, you can a 2.5 triple bypass, you know, overlapping layout, it's going to be fine. Like 4 tube stuffs. I mean, it's, gets you 2 rebound adjustments. I don't really feel like it's a huge thing in the front of a rock bouncer, but
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. It's great if you've got it. If not, whatever. And then, just a 2.0 cool carriers, and again, I mean, it's weight, you know, if it's lighter, all we need is a 2.0. If you're heavier for whatever reason, maybe we'd look at like a 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
But, on the front of a rock bouncer, like on the rear, again, you know, how big a fuel cell we got, that kind of thing. Honestly, a lot of these rock bouncer guys, I don't, other than like a 2.5, 4 tube, I don't really see a ton of reason to go to a 3.0 unless you're going to do something with getting weight in the back.
Yeah.
As far as bypasses are concerned, like, a lot of time, you've got to have a reason. The weight has to be there, or the leverage has to be there to need like the larger diameter.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have weight, then you're just, okay, well, so now we've got, these big shocks with, massive pistons and not
Nothing.
enough weight,
Nothing to
not
push them
enough weight
down.
to like force them around,
Yeah.
And so while it looks badass, don't get me wrong, 5 tube 3.0 on the back, 1 inch
Mm-hmm.
shafts, like, yeah, it's all great and it looks awesome and it's definitely something to talk about. But if we don't have the weight to make them work properly, then you've just got a kick-ass shock in an application that's really not meant for. And again, weight dependent, 2.0 or 2.5, emulsion that we're going to make a cold carrier is probably going to be enough. I mean, the way that rockbound, unless SRS starts running like Ultra 4 tracks or something, I get it. They're doing short course now, but I still don't see, they're just not running long enough
Mm-hmm.
to experience the type of heat fade that you're going to get in an Ultra 4 race. So, and that's why, okay, so like a Ultra 4 buggy, again, the weight, but like on Cody's, I'll use his for example. It's a
Mm-hmm.
TMR chassis, 2-inch tube, big fuel cell, spare tire, all that kind of stuff. A typical heavy Ultra 4 ready to do battle. You know, uh, in the front, I do like a 2.5 coilover with a reservoir, and probably, it depends on the budget, but like a 2.5 bypass.
Mm-hmm.
3.0 if I can afford it. Again, in the back, for a and like this is a solid axle application. You get IFS involved, it's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
But same like, but on the back, I'd still probably run like this is what we're trying to do at Cody's. He's got 2.0 coilovers and 2.5 bypasses right now. Like
Mm-hmm.
in the rear, we want to step up to a 2.5 coilover and a 3.0 5.2 bypass,
Mm-hmm.
because and we're trying to get some more wheel travel. Different conversation, but we want to get enough suspension to hopefully combat some shock fade and
Mm-hmm.
be able to soak up some different terrain that you're seeing in the Ultra 4 race, and having a little bit more shock in those long races. I mean, obviously, shock fade is something that a lot of people experience,
Mm-hmm.
and you see different manufacturers with like fins on the reservoirs and
Mm-hmm.
and all that kind of stuff, and that's that's all just trying to make the shocks last longer for these long distance races. um you know and something else, like kind of off topic,
Mm-hmm.
but kind of along, like I get guys, they're like, man, I'm not endurance racing, so why do I need reservoirs? Like, that's not they're not just like coolers.
Yeah.
They are they're part of the shock, to make it work better.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just, you've got an IFP, you've got nitrogen on one side and oil on the other. And, and once you talk to people and kind of explain how the shock works, they're like, oh, okay, people just always told me that I'm not going fast, so I don't need reservoirs. Like, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
They're not coolers,
Yeah.
So
well, on that topic, I was going to see, what do you think about Pellegrino's decision in the 4400 class to run a single shock up front, which he and Fox rather have been very adamant that they're like, cooling, and they're not, experiencing massive fade or anything like that. What do you think about that?
Hey, man, if it works, more power to him. I'm sure he's doing like something super cool that all the rest of us don't really have access to. So, I mean, I would probably take that like single shock with a grain of salt. Like, what are y'all? I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
No, but I'm just gonna assume that he's not just bought some 3.0 off the shelf. Like, they're probably doing something that will allow just a single shock to work in the front. Like,
yeah, I'd have to go back and listen to the podcast with him, but if I recall correctly, I think they're actually running some kind of cooler system through it.
Like, some of the Foxes have those coolers built into like the lines, and I mean, it just creates just this massive conglomeration of lines and a cooler and reservoir, which it's cool. Like, don't get me wrong, it's different. It's just not for, what I'm saying, like, it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they're doing something like that, and Fox is always doing something new and progressive and all that kind of stuff. So
all right, last question for you. Preferred brand?
Man, I don't have a preferred brand. I like Radflow. For me, Radflow is easy to work with. I can get parts, through fill and whatnot, readily available. You venture off to, like, when people ask me all the time, like, what shocks do I need? And I tell them all the time, I don't care if you have like Radflow, Fox, King, ADS, take your pick, because after that, some of these other brands just have fallen behind as far as technology. Some of them just never had the quality from the start. You get what you pay for. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just the facts. Like, you 100%, like, if you go buy some other shocks, that you're just not getting the new technology, and you're not getting the quality that you're going to get with some of these others. But
yeah, if you're going to spend 80%, you might as well just get what you need,
I mean, I get it. Like, not every, nobody has unlimited budgets. I mean, some people do, but not most. And, I learned a long time ago, like, every time I skimped on a part, like, it bit me in the ass, and then I spent twice the money buying the right thing the second time, and then I still had that pile of junk that I bought the first time that I never should have spent the money on, when I should have just bought the right thing in the first place. So I learned building my buggy, and just along the way, like, what the good parts are. Like, if you can't afford them, like, figure something out. Like, I don't know, I can't tell her. It's easy to say, but for me, I will save and buy the better quality part that won't leave me stranded or whatever.
Understood. Okay, this is my real last two questions. Last, they're small. Who is your favorite rock bouncer driver?
Man,
I'm gonna put you on the spot now.
I don't know, man. Like, there's so many interesting, obviously, the reject stuff. I work a lot with them guys. So, Dexter and Danny and Charlie Brown, and then I don't have a favorite, man. I like all of it. Tim Cameron, obviously been an icon in that, racing forever, and just trail rigs before, but I don't know. Like, I don't really have a favorite. Like, I've got.
All right. I got you. I'll pin you in something you're less involved in. Favorite Ultra4 driver, or favorite Ultra4. We'll say race program. How's that?
Man, Miller Motorsports. What they've done they're East Coast guys, so I got to pull for them. They have a pretty awesome program, and that's something that, Cody and I talked about. Like, man, you see them guys, and they're like dialed. Everything's precision, everything's right. They drive hard, but they're not like just, you see the guys that are out of control, right?
Yeah.
And you're never like they're pushing it, but they're not like, yep, that they came in with like all four flat, because they're just like, ridiculous. You know what I'm saying? Like, them guys are to me like top notch as far as Ultra4, and there's others, don't get me wrong, but they're East Coast guys, so I gotta support that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, that's all I had for you. Anything else before we plug like your social medias and all that fun stuff?
Man, gotta thank my wife. She puts up with the ridiculous schedule and stuff that I try and keep, and getting my business off the ground. She's been 110% had my back and whatnot, and so gotta thank my wife, man. She's the backbone around here. So
hey, I understand that. I had to I told mine yesterday in advance and was like, hey, this means you'll have to put both kids to bed and figure it out. And each, she wasn't even feeling good tonight, and she was like, "No, you're good. Go ahead, do your thing." So I was like,
right.
All right, it's the best, man. Absolutely the best. But where can people find you? Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you're on. Where can they find you at?
So I pretty much do Facebook and Instagram. Instagram's just Diddy's Big Block Race Shop. Facebook, I've got a shop account I don't really use because of the way that Facebook does their garbage. I pretty much just use my personal page. It's just Chris Weygandt. So I can post stuff on there and people actually see it, and I don't have to pay Facebook money. So
yeah, understood that. Okay, I did have one fan question that got tossed in. Why is it called Diddy's Big Block?
So the name was, a buddy and I kind of started this as, kind of like part sales. And he had been doing some part sales before under a different name. He sold the business, and, we started this up. We just needed a name. It was just kind of a joke. Like, it, we kind of all, joked around for years. Like, you used to be, you go four-wheeling and you see, like, I don't know if you remember seeing, but like people would take like old dirt cars and make them into tube chassis, and like, always like big block, whatever, we'd be like, oh, got these big block out here off the track, that kind of thing. And it was kind of a joke. I mean, honestly, it was a joke. And we were just I was working full time, and he called his shop back at his place like Diddy's Big Block Race Shop, and just as for fun, as a joke. And so we started the business selling parts, the Mark Williams stuff, and then my shop was taken off, and I had to call it something, and I was like, I'm just gonna use that. Like, I didn't want to have two names. Like, I didn't want to have like, a name for part sales and then a name for my shop. But it's, like, my shop's me. Like, the part sales is our joint deal for the Mark Williams stuff. So.
Well, cool, man. So with that, I'm out of questions. You have anything else?
No, man. I appreciate you having me on. Appreciate your time,
dude.
I'm glad you're doing a podcast again, man. Like, I seen looks like Wyatt's kind of taking a back seat on the talent tank too, man. I enjoy listening to both of y'all, and hopefully y'all find some excitement in the podcast world again and do some more. So
well, it's funny actually. Wyatt reached out, or I don't remember if I did or Wyatt reached out to me, but we were talking and I was like, I'm glad you exist because I can't listen to myself, and I made the podcast because I wanted to listen to these episodes and this kind of stuff, and then I tried listening back to myself and I was like, oh god, this is terrible. So I'm glad he exists. I'm sure that he'll be back in some kind of different capacity.
Right.
But all that
man,
said,
I thought the thing that you did with Essentially Off-Road was cool, where you went to their shop and like did a shop tour. I thought, I mean, people used to kind of do that. I don't know if it was like Ricky B or somebody
Yeah,
like that was doing like those like shop visits. I thought that was cool to see.
yeah.
You know, it's always interesting. Like you see these guys build this awesome stuff, and you're like, well, you know, do they have like all the tools, or like are they working with what I got?
Yeah.
You know,
Well, I'll tell
so
you
I
what.
thought
If
that was cool.
my plan is to come up to Dirty Turtle for
Yeah,
the Ultra 4 race, and I'll set it up and I'll make a time. I'll come meet you up there. I know you'll be there.
yeah,
I know you'll be there before me
yeah,
at Dirty Turtle, but maybe on the way back in, we can meet up back at the shop and all that kind of fun stuff. So
yeah, man.
I'm excited, man. It's been great to have you on. Obviously, you know, we've worked together as the podcast has grown, as your business has grown. I have been the most pleased to work with you and get to know you. It's been super exciting, and I'm sorry it took 92 episodes to get you on the show.
Nah, man, it's all good. I appreciate you having me on. I enjoy the show. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you,
uh,
man. So
yeah,
with that, what we'll do, if you'll stay on the line for me, I'm going to close it out here. And thanks everybody for watching. I appreciate it. And make sure you guys follow Diddy's Big Block Race Shop on Instagram, Facebook. Find Chris on Facebook as well. And as always, you know, sharing the stream, sharing the videos, all that kind of fun stuff. It helps a lot. Make sure you guys are subscribed on YouTube so we can actually start making some money over there too. So, all right, everybody, have a good night.